It's the John Doe Radio Show.
Welcome to the John Doe Radio Show. I am your host, John Doe. Thank you very much for hanging out with us. Hopefully, you are having a fantastic past couple of weeks. The biggest news story by far the past couple of weeks has been the Sweet Leaf raids and the bud tenders that were thrown under the bus. We'll talk about it extensively coming up here, and we'll explain everything that's happened if you're unfamiliar with the situation. We also talk about an awesome situation with California convictions and how if you've been convicted of a cannabis crime, you have a very good chance of having that case reviewed and even in some cases, eliminated from your record completely. We talk about California banks and an effort there to have banking be put into the mix when it comes to cannabis. A far-fetched push, but still something that California, Colorado has tried to push before. Texas, we go into more detail about the ridiculous program that goes into place there, even though it is something positive to look at as forward movement in the Lone Star State, a place where you consider it to be one of the most conservative places in America. Something positive to still look at, but still we have to be realistic about the program and how it was set up to fail. It's that time of the year where companies are having their Christmas parties, and outside of companies, I guess, people having their Christmas parties where people get a little bit too crazy, drink a little bit too much. There's always that one person that's a little bit too farked up, goes a little bit too far beyond. Don't be that person, is what I'm saying. Don't be that person. Green Dot, the company I work for, had our company party this past Saturday. Fantastic time, great food, great people. I said it before, I think last week, that, and I'll say it again if I didn't make it clear enough before, I think it's important. Maybe I get a little personal with you for a second. If you've listened to the John Doe Radio Show for an extended period of time, you definitely know my story. And I'm not going to get into that story too much or go off too much on a sidetrack here. I did want to talk about the hash that we were smoking at this party and how awesome it is. So basically, I guess maybe I'll get that out of the way. One thing when I got home from this company party that smacked me in the head and hit me was, not only did I get some awesome hash to smoke, but it hit me that regardless of how much money you have in this world, regardless of your place in this world, some of us here in Colorado and in other places are smoking and are participating in top of the line, connoisseur level, however you want to put it, top shelf, best of the best situations happening anywhere in the world. The best hash, the best marijuana. If you're involved with a company like that, I mean, it should just mean so much to you that you get to be a part of something so unique anywhere in the world that, like, if someone from Europe wants to get the best hash in the world, they have to come here to Colorado. Or if you want to get super picky about it, fine, California, Oregon, Washington. You get the point I'm trying to make. They have to come here. And it's so special that we get to be a part of that, and so awesome that we get to be a part of that, which leads me into the personal thought that I was going to kind of give you this week. I've tried to keep personal things out of the JDR as we start it up again, and as we start to build the show, maybe there'll be some segments, and when we bring back Bike or some people that I know, we'll talk a little bit more personally. But for people that have listened to JDR for an extended period of time, you know my story, you know my struggle, the BS that I've put myself through, the BS that my felony put me through, not being able to be involved with the cannabis industry with a badge legally for basically the entire period of legalization here in Colorado. I mean, for the past 9.5 years. So you're aware that I did get my badge 2 years ago, worked off and on with companies, maybe you're not aware of necessarily my employment history of the past 2 years, but I've worked off and on with a few cannabis companies, a few people who I consider very good friends, and in situations where, you know, you figured that, yeah, this would be a fantastic situation for yourself to be in and to grow from. And it's just not necessarily like that in life. I mean, we all run into situations where we think it's going to be the most amazing thing, and it just turns out to not work out. It's not necessarily that anything bad happens. It just didn't work out how we thought it worked out. And I've definitely been through a few of those situations, whether it be my fault or it just didn't work out on the other end also. It's neither here nor there. I've learned quite a bit in the past few years, and an important lesson, I guess, over the past 10 years that I've learned, or at least in the past 3-4 years since I've been in recovery. I was hesitant to spin out that word because it's a word that some people look at and they kind of shy away from. They're like, "Oh man, I don't know about this. Is it recovery? Like this dude been through that?" Yeah, I had a drinking problem. There's other things that go into this story that I'm lucky to have got out of it like I did. I'm lucky to be alive today, to put things, to plainly put it. I feel lucky to be alive today. So I've tried to learn and take some lessons, go through a 12-step program, better my life from being this super pissed off person and really sour and angry at how I wasn't able to get in the industry and not able to, et cetera, et cetera. All right, said I wasn't going to get off on this too much, so I'll try not to. So we've gone from that to now today, especially this past week, with me trying to take inventory of some of my feelings, reassess where I'm at in life, kind of a new year type thing, but also as part of my program that I'm working to stay as positive and as effective as a person that I can be for myself. Like, I know that I can be greater than what I was being. And that's the whole goal, is to become better and to learn and to continuously give yourself an education in life and expand your mind. And definitely the ultimate goal with all this is just to be happy. Just fucking be happy, man. And I wanted way too much out of life, and I still do. Way too much out of life than what I was getting, and wanted more, and wasn't happy with the moment and where I was at. And so it led me into feeling like a really shitty person and leading to some really shitty behavior. But with this past week's recapturing kind of the spice I have for activism and doing JDR and being involved in the cannabis industry, which I kind of got off on track on here, is one of the things I've learned is, don't put all your eggs into one basket, that a certain situation may not turn out to how you expected, and especially in this cannabis industry. But I can tell you right now, and hopefully I don't come back and these words don't bite me in the ass. I can tell you guys that I'm more happy and stoked with the direction that I'm headed, the company I'm with, than I have ever been, I think, in my entire life. You still have the personal things that go on in your life that you've built up. I'm 34 years old now, and the things that you've built up over your life and have to deal with on a daily basis, those are things that you kind of have to separate, I think, in a category and not necessarily compartmentalize, but put, on a spreadsheet and look at the importance and look at what you can work on at the time. And I feel at this very moment in my life, the ability that I've had to be able to just become happy with the surroundings around me and know that I'm on a good road to be able to do the things that I've wanted to do. And more so than anything, really what makes me feel great right now is working for a company that cares about its employees, that makes the best product anywhere, and shows promise to expand. And then I just can't tell you, man, it's awesome. It's good times. And without going into too much more with that, like I said, I just wanted to give you a personal update on kind of where I'm at, an end of the year thing, a rebalance to all the kind of pissed off negativity that I put out there with JDR about not being able to be involved in this industry. And maybe a lesson to some of the people listening that if you just have a little bit of patience, one of my only regrets is that I just would have been a lot more patient. I was going to say a little, but in truth, I mean a lot more patient with the situation I was in, learned from the people around me, took the suggestions of the people around me, and focused more on the good and what can be done rather than what you don't have and what can't be done. Does that make sense? Anyway, it's good times. I hope you enjoyed this week's JDR. As I mentioned, we're talking about Sweet Leaf Cali convictions being wiped out, California banks, and Texas program probably going to fail. Let's get to it.
This is drugs. This is your brain on drugs. Any questions?
By far the biggest news of the week has been the Sweet Leaf raids and the arrests of bud tenders in those raids. Before we get into this story, I want to read you the law as it is in Colorado. And as anybody understands it, I have yet to see somebody claim that this is not the case besides the police who arrested these people. A retail marijuana store and its employees are prohibited from selling more than 1 ounce of retail marijuana or equivalent in retail marijuana product during a single sales transaction. So that's pretty much the gist of the rule. That is the rule right there. 1 ounce per transaction. Now, it says in there also that equivalent of marijuana product. There's edible amounts that you can buy that equal up to 1 ounce, and there is hash amounts that equal up to 1 ounce. But specifically what we're talking about here is just marijuana. It's a flat-out ounce of marijuana. I'm going to get into this story. The story is misleading also in a few parts because it says clearly what they did was illegal, basing that off of what the police are saying. So I find it frustrating, and this is why people say that there's fake news out there, is because news agencies really don't do as much digging as they should and don't look at things in a non-biased way. They take what the police say or what a politician is saying and run with it, and it's not the case. I mean, I really wish. And there are a few publications here in Denver that are trying to dig into it a little bit more. I think 9 News and The Westward have done a few better stories on this, but I wanted to find the story that maybe had the most holes and could be corrected the most so that we could talk about it here. So we'll get into this story, and as the story unfolds, we'll discuss the entire situation, and as I understand it now, how farkin' ridiculous it is that this has happened. Ridiculous that it happened because they attacked the bud tenders. All right, it's a complicated issue. You could argue that, yes, they shouldn't have been doing this. All right, read the story. A year-long undercover sting operation led to the arrest of 13 bud tenders who worked at 7 Sweet Leaf marijuana dispensaries. More arrests are forthcoming, police say, as a result of the investigation into some stores allegedly selling more than 10 times the legal amount allowed under state law. The Denver Department of Excise and Licenses suspended all 26 Sweet Leaf marijuana licenses within the city and county of Denver. For some reason, I've read through this story like 3 times now, and that was the first time I caught allegedly being part of their story. So at least they added that into there. So allegedly selling more than 10 times the legal amount allowed under state law. I read you. What was the state law? 1 ounce per transaction. Police say officers executed 7 search warrants at Sweet Leaf dispensaries in Denver and 1 in Aurora. Arrest records released Friday reveal an undercover cop was able to buy 12 times the legal limit at Sweet Leaf dispensary at 38th and Clay Street. Okay, that's the part of the story that they didn't have the allegedly in. They say 12 times the legal limit at a Sweet Leaf dispensary on 38th and Clay Street, having walked in 12 different times, presenting identification over the period of just 2 hours, split into different sting sessions. Some neighbors in the area were celebrating the business shutdown. This is something that has been a problem for a long time, said Cody Ketch, whatever his name is, a Denver resident who lives across the street from a Sweet Leaf on Clay Street. Countless customers showed up to the store Friday and were surprised to find the license suspended sign posted on its locked door. It's a little disappointing, just the fact that they got shut down, said one young woman. According to arrest documents, the sting operation found that Sweet Leaf bud tenders in at least 6 Denver stores and 1 Aurora store were selling far more pot than the state regulations allow. Amendment 64 requires no more than 1 ounce of marijuana per sale. Even the story says Amendment 64 requires no more than 1 ounce of marijuana per sale. And why I'm also confident with running with the idea that this was technically not illegal. It may be frowned upon and it may be bad that these bud tenders, some of them sold 9 ounces, 12 ounces in a short period of time. It's frowned upon, but it's not something that this is something that's happening in many different dispensaries. So the interpretation of this rule is a sideways jab, I think, at our industry. I'm going to finish up the story before I get into too much sideways on this and explain my full statement of feelings on this. Undercover cops wearing hidden videos, hidden cameras, wrote in arrest affidavits that one store sold an ounce to the same undercover buyer 14 times in less than 3 hours. Another store allegedly sold 6 times the limit in just over 1 hour. And still another shop allegedly sold 16 times what the police say is the limit in about 6 hours, to name a few. This person that they talked to that lives in the neighborhood next to the 38th, the Sweetleaf on 38th, they said we've seen traffic out here and just shady characters that pull up and park, and then they stay there for hours, and then they make illegal drug deals, and then they go in and buy more. She said the extra pot on the streets led to illegal drug deals and even threats of violence experienced by her friend. This is where things get fishy. When people start talking about stories that their friend told them. This person says, when he came in and said he threatened me with a gun, I was like, okay, we're calling the police. Police said complaints of criminal activity tipped them off to the illegal dispensary sales, which triggered their undercover investigation. The 13 Sweetleaf bud tenders arrested and booked into jail were facing a combination of felony and misdemeanor charges. So let me go back to what this person said. I don't know, they cut out part of the story here, it looks like, from what I had read the other day. The part about the gun, where that comes in, is this person says that their friend went out to confront somebody that was in front of the dispensary, maybe doing illegal sales, and when they told this person, could you please take your business elsewhere, the guy in the vehicle produced a gun. So at first I wanted to call BS on a story like that, but if this person called the police, and that is part of the reason that this investigation was started into Sweetleaf, that maybe there was an exorbitant amount of complaints on this particular chain as opposed to other chains, and I don't even want to say other dispensary names that could be doing this, because in my mind, what's going on, finishing out the story, Denver police officers have yet to have 13 Sweetleaf buds. See, I'm getting too excited and losing my train of thought with this whole process and jumping around to 15 different things. Denver police said officers had yet to arrest 9 additional Sweetleaf employees with outstanding warrants. It is unknown if or when Sweetleaf shops would reopen. All right, we're finished with that story. Now let's try and focus on what the facts are of this case and what we really should be thinking about in this whole thing. All right, so some of these bud tenders, I think so far 5 or 6 of them have been charged with felonies because what they sold was over the 4-ounce sales limit that equals a felony here in Colorado. I don't even... Part of me just wants to scream at this whole situation because we've already talked about what the rule is here in Colorado. That 1 ounce per transaction. In my mind, and another part of this that I didn't even mention, so sidetracked by the ridiculousness of this whole thing. Another thing I didn't even mention is that starting January 1st, the law here in Colorado clarifies these type of sales to technically be illegal. So with that said, and adding that to the mix, it makes even less sense that they would go after these bud tenders. Now, my thought originally with all this, knowing the law as I know it, if the bud tender was selling 1 ounce per transaction, I felt that the burden falls on the customer to make sure that they are following the law, because that person could go to Sweetleaf, even if Sweetleaf was tracking this person's sales and refused them after an ounce sale and didn't let them come back, they could still go to another store because there's nothing in place, no tracking in place for this person to go to another store and buy more cannabis. So in my mind, the burden in some ways, not 100%, the burden in some ways falls on that customer to make sure that they are following the rules and doing the right thing. Another part of this also is that this is completely naive thinking, and I'll agree that I got into a large argument with the girlfriend about this when this news came out, that I felt, and a lot of other people felt, that bud tenders in some ways were shielded from some of this ridiculousness, that low-level employees at some of these dispensaries would not be the ones that cops or police or whoever would go after. It's not necessarily been the policy in California when the feds have gone after people, and in almost every other story there is about raids and prosecution, the bud tenders and low-level employees have not been the ones, if anybody's charged, have not been the ones that have been charged with the crime. This situation came as such a massive surprise in so many different ways. I can't even tell you. I've mentioned, if I haven't mentioned this before, I've definitely mentioned it to friends around me. Sweet Leaf is a store that we deliver to at Green Dot Labs. It's one of the people that buys our products. So that's probably another thing I should have told you too before we start the store. That has nothing to do with anything that I'm talking about now, but they're a person that we sell product to. I go to Sweet Leaf stores, many stores of Sweet Leaf, most of the Sweet Leaf stores, at least once a week. And I can tell you their policies and procedures that they have in place are some of the most solid of any store in the entire industry. What I should have done with this story is write myself an outline, and I'm kicking myself in the butt that I didn't write an outline in this, because there's just so many different things that I'm trying to shoot from the hip with this that it was stupid. So next time maybe I'll do that. Anyway, we learn. I should know that by now. But okay, so with Sweet Leaf being one of those dispensaries that I would have thought would have been the last company to run into any issues with compliance or with the police, I mean, it blew me away. The day these raids happened, my first stop was at Sweet Leaf, and it was a really weird situation. I mean, it was really fucked up because, number one thing that we have to worry about in this industry is being robbed and running into some really weird situations that you should recognize before you get into them, or as they're happening, and be able to exit them or filter the situation to the right person. And I don't know if that makes any sense to people outside the industry, or if that does. Hopefully that makes sense to you. So I showed up to Sweet Leaf, and I noticed there was a sign on the door, but with Sweet Leaf, you're told to go to the back door for deliveries. It's a security protocol. You're not walking in front of a bunch of customers with product, and usually the security guard meets you at the back door, lets you in. It's all taken care of there. I don't want to get into too many details about the security process of it, but I went to the back door, and somebody came around the corner and asked me a question about if Sweet Leaf was open and if I worked there. I said, no, I don't work there. Came around the corner, read the note that was on the front door, and weirdly enough, the note said that they were closed for the day for remodeling. That threw up a red flag to me in my security protocol, everything that I'm thinking of in my process when I'm out taking care of business for our company, and also, trying to make sure that other companies are also taken care of too. I mean, my mind is going a million miles an hour as I try to explain this. Sorry, I apologize. But there was a note on the door that raised a flag to me that something was going on. Something was weird. I knew Sweet Leaf at that location was probably not having a remodel that day. It was way too crazy out of the norm. So the pretty much first thought that came into my mind at this point, after I had knocked on the door and nobody answered, I figured if they were remodeling on inside, somebody may have answered, but maybe they were told not to answer the door. One of the other thoughts that shot into my brain first off was that maybe they're getting robbed. And they were getting robbed, but not in the traditional sense of getting robbed. They were being robbed by the police. Not at this particular store. This was just one of the stores that was closed down because they had all their licenses closed down. This was not one of the stores that was raided. So I started making phone calls to try and figure out what was going on, because obviously this situation didn't make any fucking sense. And so quickly realized and heard that Sweet Leaf had their licenses revoked. And a lot of information was being passed around on a Facebook group called the Colorado Badge Network. Basically, if you have a Colorado badge to work in the industry, you can be a part of this group. Lots of really cool news. It's kind of like a support group, too, for people here in the industry. So this just was a massive surprise because I had known Sweet Leaf to be one of the most well put together stores. Nicole West has been an acquaintance that I've talked to over the years. I know the procedures that she had put in place while she was the VP for this company, pretty much during this whole time that the sting was going on. And I'm not going to speak for her, so I'm not going to continue with that conversation. I know that Sweet Leaf and other companies followed the 1 ounce per transaction rule, and if they would have known that this was going to be an issue, that bud tenders were going to be arrested, and I'm not trying to speak for Sweet Leaf here, but I gotta say, if they knew, knowing what I know about them, if they knew that this was going to be a problem like this, they would have put policy in place to eliminate this from happening. Now, with that said, it's easy to go back and say, hey, it's ridiculous selling someone 9 ounces within a 2-hour period, 12 ounces within I understand that. I get that. Okay. Let's put that aside because that conversation is a separate conversation. Because if that were the law and that were the case that you couldn't do that, I wouldn't be defending this company and the bud tenders as much as I am right now. Because that is not the case. This is the law. To me, what happened with the police in this situation is that they got a ton of complaints with Sweet Leaf. It raised suspicion. They decided to start an investigation because of whatever reason police and investigators decide. They get a wild hair up their ass, and they usually go after the lowest hanging fruit. One of the easiest investigation they can get, they'll go after. The crazy thing about this is that I don't understand why why would they even... The only thing I can think of with this is that they wanted to fire a shot across the bow of the industry. The more that I look into this case, the more that it reads out, I don't even see how they thought that they could get a conviction with this sting. I don't know how. I'm not a lawyer, but I don't know how these people are going to get convicted if the law is followed as it is now. I don't see how a jury convict these people. I don't even see how prosecutors in Denver can keep these cases. The ultimate hope that I feel for this situation, the outcome, is that over the next few weeks, these cases will be dropped by the Denver District Attorney's Office. Because not a single one of these cases, in my mind, and I've heard from lawyers, Cedarburg Law Firm, if you want to hear, if you're like, oh, well, what lawyer are you talking about? Cedarburg Law Firm has said that there are nuances in the law, and even they're questioning how this can even happen or how a conviction can even be secured with this. It's absolutely bonkers. So in my mind, what I feel like what happened with the police is that they started this investigation. They wanted to fire a shot across the bow. They wanted to make it as grandiose as possible and had a reason to do so because they wanted to try and trigger changes for lower possession limits, for more tracking on this, and wanted to make a big scene about it. I still can't connect the dots on how they thought that they can get convictions on this, but maybe in whatever case they think that they can. They probably wouldn't have gone after this case if they didn't think that they could get a conviction. It would blow me away if they were like, okay, we're just going to try and fire a warning shot across the bow of the industry. That is such a waste of resources. And to ruin bud tenders' lives, to try and challenge the law, that's what the police do. We have to realize that we're not dealing with a fair system here. So it does. It absolutely blows me away that this even happened. But what I think is that they got halfway through all this. They realized that the law was going to change come January 1st, struggled to finish out their investigation. And as the investigation, as they saw it, the prosecution they were going to be able to have was falling apart because of updated regulations and rules. They fired the trigger before the rules were updated on January 1st. I mean, with all that being said, everything going into this mix, I still just don't understand because, as we said at the beginning of this story, the law reads 1 ounce per transaction, period. It's just it's just incredibly frustrating. I can't believe that, and we'll go back to talking about how I thought and other people thought that bud tenders and people in this industry, certain people in this industry, could be shielded. This was a massive wake-up call to all of us. A massive wake-up call to all of us. If you did not already realize, if you work in the cannabis industry, that what you're doing, even if it's quote-unquote not in a gray area, there's already rule. We here in Colorado and in Denver have some of the most hammered-out regulations of anywhere in the entire nation. If this can happen here, then it can happen anywhere. And the fear, ultimately, that hit me is not that locally we can maybe defend ourselves. We have laws and solid regulation here that these bud tenders and sweet leaf can get their lawyers and go after the Denver Police Department, go after the Department of Revenue. And maybe if this is completely lopsided and they went after these guys for no reason, this leaves the Denver Police Department open to such a massive lawsuit for violating these bud tenders' rights that it blows me away that they even went out. I don't know how they went. The loss that they could get with this case is so big. I don't see how they thought that this was a good idea. And unless there's something that we don't know about, unless there's something that I'm not seeing with this case, and I tried this for the past few days to look into this as much as possible, look at what lawyers have to say about this, look into the law, read word for word what the law is. I don't know. I don't know how this could have happened. That's putting aside, as we've said, that this probably wasn't a cool thing to do. I'm not saying it was kosher, okay? It was not. It's not something that is a proud thing that happens here in Colorado, but it happens. There is a store in Trinidad. There's 22 stores, I think is the number, in Trinidad, Colorado, for a city of like 300,000, 200,000 people. 22 stores. You're like equaling massive. You're equaling surrounding Denver city numbers when you start talking about that. So why this happened to Sweet Leaf, why it even happened, period, and what we can learn from this is crazy. So the other thing where I was going with this is that locally we can defend ourselves. What if, for instance, we're going to use me as an example. I don't want to put this juju on myself, but I also don't want to put this juju on anyone else either. That if there was some stupid situation to where, I don't know, I got in a car accident or for whatever crazy farked up reason, because life works in some farked up ways, federal police inadvertently got involved in a situation that I was in. You know, I don't know. The only thing I can think of is that maybe there was a crash next to the federal building, right in front of the federal building, and federal police came in, and I don't know. That's what happens when situations like this Sweet Leaf situation start happening. Your mind starts running a million miles an hour about, oh shit, this is a dangerous thing that we're doing as far as being able to possibly ruin your future and having someone else come in, the police come in and ruin your future. Like if the feds were to just inadvertently run across me and having, you know, the amount of cannabis that I dude, it's a little bit scary. It is. It's a little bit scary. But the other thing that follows that thought with me is that I am willing to do this. I'm willing to be a part of this system to try to make this system better so that future generations don't have to worry about the things that we're worrying about today. And already we're at a point where I didn't think, if you thought we would be at this point with cannabis sales in the United States 10 years ago, oh yeah, we're going to have legal cannabis in multiple states, there's sales going to be going on, and Colorado's going to be flourishing. No, never. Go back to the original JDRs and what we're talking about on JDR. Never. I mean, we thought that the future was coming a lot sooner, maybe, than a lot sooner than some people over the previous generations had expected it. I mean, your parents, and when the drug war first started, I mean, this is something that they didn't even, this not even in the realm of possible thought that marijuana sales could happen in half my generation, much less the previous generation. So it's awesome how fast we've moved forward, but we still sit in this crazy gray area to where this type of shit can come in and happen. Holy crap, I'm going a freaking million miles an hour. Focus. I think we're close to being done with this story. I'm going to follow this story, make sure we stay on top of it. There are Facebook groups that have been set up to help some of the employees out that are out of work because every Sweet Leaf is shut down. Sweet Leafs, I've heard this secondhand, and I hate to repeat this, but I say this because, and I only repeat it because maybe it'll help out, get people helping out the employees a little bit more. Sweet Leaf's bank accounts, from what I understand, have been frozen. So bonus checks that they received this past Friday were pulled back because the money was still in the account, etc. So it's a frustrating situation to have happen around any time of the year, much less the holidays. So there are some Facebook groups and some toy drives that have been set up. If you're interested in getting involved in those, you can look on the John Doe Radio Show Facebook page. I'll repost the groups there. There's a few GoFundMes that have been set up also. I'm going to wait to repost those for a few days because, as always, with something like this, when something like this happens, there are a few pages that pop up, and who exactly is going to be in charge of those pages and where is the money going to get filtered to is always a concern with this. So as soon as I find out all that information, I will get it to you. I apologize for being so jumbled and crazy about this story. It just pisses me off, and it's insane how it's even happened. I don't understand how the police can infer the rule to... And another thing is, it would have just taken a letter. Like, why couldn't the police just send a letter or have the Department of Revenue try to handle this? It's so sideways and underhanded for the way that this went down. I feel so horrible for the bud tenders that were caught up in this. It's just absolutely ridiculously horrible. I realized I forgot to add to this story some details and background about tracking in Colorado. Medical marijuana tracking for customer purchases is illegal because it falls under medical records violations and all that jazz. The recreational side of things, the rule states that retailers, dispensaries do not have to track a customer's buys, how much they purchase in a day. That's all the rule says, is that they do not have to track this. What blows me away, and this is another reason why I feel like this whole thing that's happened to Sweet Leaf is crazy, is because if dispensaries felt that they were going to be busted for multiple transactions to one consumer in a day, they would have put tracking in place. There is multiple point-of-sale systems that are in dispensaries. So when you go to check out, that's what the bud tender checks you out on. It's at anywhere you buy something, it's a point-of-sale system, and this point-of-sale system tracks the sales, etc. Depending on where you work, there's a million different configurations for how the POS systems function. In Colorado specifically, the largest POS systems that are operating here in Colorado allow for this type of situation to be tracked. So you come into a dispensary, give your name, your ID, it's put in the point of sale system when you check out, when you pay for it, and then if they wanted to, it could be turned on in the system that would go under your file. And then if you were to come back in and try and buy another ounce that day, a flag would come up and it would let the person know that this person was trying to buy more than an ounce in a day. There's really no dispensary that I have talked to, and I've tried to reach out to as many people as I could, that tracks the sales of individual customers. Number one, cannabis consumers, you're not going to be comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable with that. Because what happens if the feds get a hold of that or local police get a hold of that? Could they use it against you? They're probably not going to. If we're going to be realistic about it, there's really probably no huge concern to having your sales tracked other than the fact that sometimes people need more than an ounce. Like, it's just plain and simple. These limits are absolutely ridiculous in the first place. That's another thing that we should be attacking and talking about, is that they're in place to serve outside interests. They're in place to serve other states from not having to deal with pounds and more pounds and pounds and pounds easily being shipped to other states, and etc. That's a whole nother topic to get into. So basically what it comes down to is that these stores didn't feel like this was something that they were going to be attacked for. And it also plays into the line of thinking with me that why did they go after the bud tenders? If every store has been interpreting this rule as this way, they wanted to make a change. Why didn't they send out letters? So I just wanted to add that into the mix because it is an important part that needs to be added into this whole story and could play into how you feel about the whole thing. That this tracking can be done, but places didn't feel they needed to. Now, if you're not tracking on the rec side, you're putting yourself and your employees at huge risk at this point. All right, let's move on.
The John Doe Radio Show.
Yeah! We're all pretty well aware that California starts recreational cannabis sales January 1st. A slow rollout of licensing means not everywhere will see sales that will eventually see sales, but it's still super exciting for California. And something else that I didn't know about until this week that was incredibly surprising and promising is a lesser-known provision in the new state marijuana law that allows a second chance to people convicted of almost any cannabis crime, from serious felonies to small infractions, with the opportunity to have their criminal records cleared or the charges sharply reduced. State officials hope to reverse decades of marijuana convictions that can make it difficult for people to gain meaningful employment and disproportionately affect low-income minorities. This next quote from the Drug Policy Alliance: "We work to help create a legalized and regulated process for legal marijuana, but we also wanted to make sure we could help some way, somehow, repair the damage of marijuana prohibition." Says policy coordinator for the Drug Policy Alliance, one of the policy coordinators. The alliance said there have been 500,000 arrests for marijuana offenses in California in the past 10 years, and it estimates that up to 1 million people have reviewable convictions on their records. At least 4,500 people have filed petitions to have their sentences reduced, redesignated, or thrown out as of September, according to the California Judicial Council. The highest amount came from Riverside County, where 613 applications were filed. In addition, at least 365 people have applied to have their juvenile marijuana convictions thrown out. Not every county reported data. The change here is part of the nationwide movement to reduce marijuana charges and atone for harsh penalties during the war on drugs. At least 9 states have passed laws expunging or reducing marijuana convictions. According to the National Conference of State Legislatures, Maryland, Oregon, and Vermont also now allow convictions for marijuana offenses that are not crimes under current law to be wiped off a criminal record. The redesignation of marijuana crimes in California went into effect immediately after voters approved the measure legalizing pot. That is one of the things that surprises me the most and frustrates me the most, is that either I knew about this and forgot, which is, I don't see how this is something that I can learn about and then forget, or just plain didn't know about. But it's exciting to know, and I want you to know about it, and I want all your friends to know about it. If you have something in California that can be taken care of, that can be reduced, for instance, if you have a felony for something, and that can get dropped down to a misdemeanor, or if you have an ounce possession of pot or less, that can get completely wiped off your record. And something like that, could prevent you, if you have a drug conviction, it can prevent you from, say, going to Canada. Those crazy flapperheads up there are not going to let you in. If you have a weed conviction, in most cases, they're not going to let you in if you have a DUI. I'm pretty positive on that one. I had a buddy's boss that tried to get up to Canada for hunting moose, and he got to the border and he had a DUI conviction. They turned him around at the border. Or say someone like myself who has a felony conviction for marijuana. You think they're going to let me in? Hell no. Hell no. So if you can get into Canada, there's plenty of reasons to get into Canada. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying Canada is a horrible place. I'm saying the exact opposite, that if you can get in there and some way wipe off this conviction, then let's get her done, hey? All right, back to the story here. Redesignation of marijuana crimes in California went into effect immediately. Many viewed it as an offshoot of a 2014 ballot initiative that reduced penalties for certain drug and theft crimes. Those who want their marijuana convictions lessened must present their cases in court. Prosecutors can decide not to support a reduction should someone have a major felony, such as something including a murder on their record. Old convictions will be reclassified under the law as it reads now. For example, if someone had been convicted of possessing an ounce or less of marijuana, as I just kind of said, the conviction would be tossed out because that is now legal in California. Some district attorneys' offices notified the recently convicted and incarcerated that they were eligible to have their records changed and that they potentially could leave prison. Last year, prosecutors in San Diego searched for people convicted of marijuana offenses in the prior 3 years who would be eligible for reductions. When the measure passed, prosecutors got their petitions before a judge as soon as possible. We absolutely didn't want people to be in custody who shouldn't be in custody, said Rachel Solov, chief of the Collaborative Courts Division in the San Diego District Attorney's Office. She said that as of mid-December, the office has handled nearly 600 reductions. Man. Can I just pause for a second? I mean, number one, I need to take a drink. Number two, I'm going a million miles an hour. And number three, this might be... It's very hard for me to give credit to prosecutors, to police, to lawmakers, except for when it is especially due. And in this situation, and some of the things that have been done towards righting the wrongs of the drug war, in this specific story... I gotta stop. I'm hesitant to stop and give the golf clap, but I think maybe we should. I think it's something that we should maybe be a little bit like, just, yeah, okay, all right. Encourage the good behavior, okay? That's not to say that these people have not done horrible things in the past, and in fact, that's what they are saying, that we've done horrible things in the past, and we would like to go about correcting them. Kudos. This is a feel-good story right here. It is. It's definitely a feel-good story. Maybe because I understand also, as someone who's been affected by a felony marijuana conviction, and I'm talking, I haven't been affected as much as a lot of other people. I don't want to make it seem like, oh, woe is me, wah. But I do have that experience that I can bring and talk about and echo for other people. If my experience is even half as shitty as some of other people's experiences, then I'm telling you right now, we have to get this righted. And one of the fears that I have when it comes to writing convictions and moving forward with progress is that people with these cannabis convictions are going to be forgot about. That laws are going to go into effect for legalization, decriminalization, and things like this that are happening in California. This is not necessarily happening in Colorado. There are a few rules in Colorado that you can petition off of for certain cannabis offenses, but something like my cannabis offense can't be petitioned to be lessened or looked at by the courts. As far as I know, I should probably look into this every 90 days, see if something hasn't been changed. Find a lawyer that we can continuously get on the show and talk about things like this with, and then, bug him about it constantly. So, I don't know. The problem is, and where I'm going with this is and I'm pretty relegated to the fact that I have a cannabis felony on my record, and it's going to affect almost everything in a professional way. I don't know, that's a pretty broad statement to make. It's going to affect a lot of things that I would like to do on official record basis, like things you have to apply for, or go through. It's frustrating to think of how many areas that this might affect your life in. So either way, I've become relegated. I've become not comfortable with the idea that this is stuck on my record. But if there's some way or somehow that it can be removed, that would be amazing. And see, the thing is, I think we get to a point where we've moved forward with cannabis reform. And I want to make sure I'm trying to put this whole long drawn out thought into close it up here and put it into a focus for you. But I'm afraid that as we go along in cannabis reform, that we're going to forget about the people that have convictions before, because it's just, they're going to get swept under the carpet. That's what I should have just said. Making a long, rambled story short, that I'm afraid that they're going to still get swept under the carpet, and it's going to be like, okay, well, they had these problems before, and they knew what they were doing. The law was farked up then, but they still knew what they were doing. And to me, I was okay with that at a certain point. I was okay with saying, okay, I farked up when the law was this way. I take responsibility for that. I'm never going to get that fixed. That's okay. Let's move forward. I still believe 90% of that. But as things go more and more down the road and we start to reform more and more laws, and it becomes more and more of an obvious, makes sense idea, and put it that in the JDR way, that we go back and start to fix some of the wrongs that we've committed. People with these marijuana convictions having an easier path moving forward in life makes absolute sense. I think the cannabis reform laws are moving forward faster than a lot of people thought they would. So it's disproportionately affecting people that have these convictions more than people that are getting the convictions now, and it's a glaring, obvious fact that that's happening. And I'm kind of glad that that's happening, because it's allowing for some of these laws to be changed. It's bringing a spotlight to this, and the people aren't getting swept under the carpet. That it kind of felt like, as laws were slowly changing, especially here in Colorado, that we were going to get swept under the carpet, and that we were just going to have to be fine, okay, with the fact that we have these convictions. And I don't think that's the case anymore. Finally made our way through that thought. I thought a few times we might get completely derailed during that thought process. All right, back to this news story, finishing out. Advocates said many people who completed their sentences still did not know they could be able to change their criminal records. Hernandez and defense lawyers said that the state has put little effort into outreach, and that most people are hearing about the opportunities through word of mouth or social media. Did I read this? Yeah, I did. I read you the one about the 600 reductions in San Diego's district attorney's office. And then we clapped about that and moved on. One of the projects we're working on this year is to notify people that this is an option, said Bruce Margolin, a Los Angeles defense lawyer who specializes in marijuana cases. It's a viable thing to do, obviously, because people are suffering with these felony convictions in so many aspects of their life. A defense lawyer who specializes in marijuana law said the requirement to go to court makes it more difficult for the poor to take advantage. That's one of the criticisms, he said, that a lot of people don't have the time or energy to access public transportation to get to the courthouse. See, I don't agree with the energy part. I think if you really truly want to get this done, you'll find the energy to get it done. I can understand, though, people maybe not having access to courts or taking time off work, etc. But even then, I mean, this is an important enough situation that you should be able to devote the time and energy to getting this done. He continues to say, what I see is the people who have more means are the ones who are taking advantage of this, and the people who have more basic struggles in their everyday life, the last thing they're thinking about is cleaning up their criminal history for their old marijuana convictions. And that's understandable. I completely get that. I understand that wholeheartedly, that getting lost into the struggles of everyday life can lead you to not even thinking that you can get this done, to not even wanting to devote the energy to it, but it is. It's super important to get it done. Everything that he just said in that last paragraph is the reason why you should get it done. So this is super exciting. If you do have anybody that you know in California that can benefit from this, please contact them. Let them know. Hernandez and others, which is the lawyer we're talking about, are hoping people without the means to hire an attorney will come to the expungement clinics where paralegals and public defenders review cases. One person, says the Washington Post in this article, saw an ad about a Saturday expungement clinic on Facebook just hours before it started. He threw on a hoodie and a backpack stuffed with legal documents and headed out on a 2.5-hour trek by bus, train, and foot. He finally arrived at a rehab center in downtown Los Angeles for the clinic, which was organized by the Californians for Responsible Marijuana Reform, a committee that campaigned for the initiative. He said, "I'm hoping they can see what's on my record and I can get cleared and go back to how things were when I first came to California." This guy that they're talking about moved to Los Angeles from Missouri in his early 20s. He appeared as an extra in a Key and Peele skit called Bling, Benzie, and The Struggle, and as an IMDb credit for the television series Woman Behind Bars. In 2008, when he was 23, he used his medical marijuana card to purchase pot and resell it on a street in Hollywood. He was arrested and charged with a felony for transporting marijuana with intentions to distribute, a rap he thinks was heavy-handed. "Mind you, I was standing in front of a McDonald's selling weed. I wasn't in no car," he said. "I didn't even have a car at the time." The conviction has barred him from many types of employment, including driving from Uber or Lyft. He works at a warehouse for $10.50 an hour. "At the end of the day, I made a mistake," he said. "I knew I was wrong, but man, come on. It's been 10 years. I'm about to be 33. And even if this case seems silly to you, reading that back that, oh yeah, maybe you deserve this or take responsibility for that. Whoops, I just smashed the microphone there. Sorry about that. I apologize. Didn't mean to smack you in the head. All right, arms were flailing by. It was getting a little bit animated in here. Sorry. All right. Even if you think that that's not something that should qualify, that should give you hope. If you're in California wondering if you can qualify, that story right there should give you hope that even you can look into this. Oh man, I am so excited about this for the people that can make this happen and work the system to reduce your crime or get it expunged. God damn, that's so exciting. That is awesome. Let's finish off this story. They talk about a restaurateur. His case was referred out, blah, 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 blah. That's pretty much the end of the story. Gives a few personal testimonies about people that have been affected by this, and it's awesome. It's very, very cool. Someone with a decades-old conviction that no longer wants to be saddled with it. He's going in to get it done. So awesome. If you're in California, I say it again, said it a few times during the story. If you're in California, if you know someone in California that can possibly have a cannabis conviction looked at and somehow rolled in some awesome way, please let them know about it. Please, 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 please. This is such an awesome freaking program that people can be a part of. All right, moving on to the next story.
It's the John Doe Radio Show.
By far, one of the largest concerns in the cannabis industry is access to banking. We've talked about it before here on how not only is it a concern to be able to open a bank account and just function as a normal business, but the security situation that goes along with this is hugely concerning enough alone in itself to petition banks to be able to allow access to accounts and eliminate a cash-only situation that a lot of people are forced into. It's uncomfortable for everyone involved, and it's a situation that is only going to lead to trouble. Everybody's run into roadblocks, and almost everybody that I know in the cannabis industry, not even just people that I know, just everybody involved in the cannabis industry has probably had multiple bank accounts closed during the period of time while they're doing this. It's frustrating. It really is. And sometimes it leaves companies in situations where they're, not paying employees on time or not able to secure the funding that they need for licensing or for growth. All right, this story from the LA Times about how California is trying to solve this situation. California possibly has found a solution to the problem of banks being unwilling to handle money from the state's multi-billion-dollar legal marijuana industry, one that officials say would be the first system of its kind in the nation. Talks are underway between the state, banks, and federal regulators on a plan to allow banks to serve a marijuana market that is expected to grow to $7 billion by 2020 in California. Starting January 1st, it will be legal to grow and sell recreational marijuana. Blah, blah, blah. State officials say without banks taking pot money, thousands of cannabis businesses will be storing and transporting billions of dollars in cash for paying employees, suppliers, and states and local taxes, which could result in robberies and violence, as I just explained. Peter Williams, Deputy Secretary and General Counsel for the State Business, Consumer Services, and Housing Agency, says we know there is a concern with having so much cash flowing around on the street in transactions for what is now a state legal product. The administration is looking for a solution to the problem. We are all concerned about the public safety issue here, and we think this is an idea to help mitigate that problem. For those who use, it could eventually mean buying with a major credit card. At the moment, purchases are generally made in cash. For those who live near pot shops, the banking system could mean fewer robberies and less violence in the neighborhood because large amounts of cash will no longer be sitting in shops or driven to tax offices. The issue has implications beyond California. 29 states have legalized the possession and sale of marijuana for medical uses, and 8 of those have approved cannabis for recreational purposes. Several other states are expected to have marijuana legalization measures on the ballot next year. Marijuana relating federal, Officials in Governor Jerry Brown's administration have quietly met with representatives of 65 banks and credit unions over the past few weeks about creating a network of financial institutions that would accept funds from pot businesses in a way that would guarantee federal banking regulators that the cannabis industry money is subjected to special tracking, oversight, and transparency. Something that I'll mention to you guys here is that in certain situations here in Colorado where companies have bank accounts, the bank requests that you send the manifest that's sent with deliveries that includes everything that was sold and being transferred and is a legal document with the state, that be included in your deposits so that they can verify the money that's being deposited goes directly towards this, like that there is proof showing that this is where the money has come from, this is what we're doing with it, so that they can try to avoid any money laundering type shiz that they're worried about getting into from the feds. To me, that seems like a pretty legit situation for a bank to put themselves in. I mean, you have to understand that the banks are concerned about getting into trouble themselves. Now, there are many situations that we could say, oh, don't worry about it with, but the Sweet Leaf situation with the bud tenders being popped is a perfect example of how anything could happen. I don't talk a lot about my personal life too much more here on the show, and I definitely have not talked too much about, girlfriend and people in my life, besides being strictly connected to the cannabis industry. But I can tell you, my girlfriend is one of those people that thinks of worst-case scenarios before they happen as much as she possibly can. And I don't know if she probably be pissed at me or put it in a certain way or whatever, but in my opinion, she worries about a little bit more than what needs to be worried on things. And probably balances out my side of shiz to where I don't worry about crap. More so now than in my previous years do I worry about things. But still, I'm trying to get better at it. But, she thinks of things before they happen most of the time and tries to avoid a horrible outcome. Worst case scenario, let's avoid this. And then I tell her, oh, that's ridiculous. Let's do it this way anyway. Some bulldoze. And then it creates this huge situation that we won't even get to here. And anyway. But it's something that we should be concerned about. That anything could happen. If it can happen, let's make a plan for it. So with banking situation, you got to understand that banks they're worried about being set an example of having the feds come in, take out one bank or a series of banks and set an example to say, look, none of y'all better be a part of this. So look what we did. So I can understand that. So what some of the companies here, like I had mentioned, including the manifest with the deposits, is a way to help secure the banks, to help reassure them, for lack of a better term. Back to the story. The green banking proposal to designate one bank as a central correspondent bank that would hold accounts from other banks that are doing businesses with marijuana firms. When a pot retailer wants to pay a distributor for a cap, the transaction would go from the retailer's bank through the central correspondent bank, which would instantly clear payment through the distributor's bank. Setting up a special clearinghouse for marijuana money would allow the state to provide a sound level of compliance oversight by assigning examiners to make sure special restrictions set by the federal government are followed, suspicious activities are reported and filed, and the number and scope of transactions through the central bank are tracked. We think that adds to the transparency of our system that will allow that will also be looked upon by favorable... where did I come up with that word, allow? Let me reread this whole sentence for you because I just screwed the whole thing up. We think that adds to the transparency of our system that will also be looked upon favorably to the federal government. I was trying to have my right eye look down and then my left eye look up in the story. This shit didn't work. My brain was like, what the fuck? Some banks have expressed interest in participating, he said. The state will now await decisions by the... Such a weirdo sometimes. Some banks have expressed interest in participating, he said. The state will now await decisions by the board of directors of banks that are willing and to voluntarily participate in such a network. It will be up to those banks to design the network with contracts. It would not take legislation. Similar central correspondent bank arrangements exist to help the credit union industry, according to Russ Heinrich, a spokesman for the State Business, Consumer Services, and Housing Agency. Brown is not the only official concerned about the lack of banking for the cannabis industry. Last month, a task force created by California Treasurer, who is running for governor in 2018, recommended that officials reconsider creating a separate government-owned bank that could serve cannabis businesses. The idea of a correspondence bank has been discussed by financial experts in the cannabis industry, including the current treasurer's working group, and has merit, according to the head of the California Growers Association. The idea is clearly the most feasible, most direct path to expanding banking services, says a representative for the banking group that we were talking about. The Correspondence Bank is a completely different proposal than the Secretary of State's government-owned bank. Some leaders of the federally regulated banking industry are skeptical of any solutions short of action by federal law enforcement and Congress. Until the federal government changes its position on the classification of the drug, a bank would be jeopardizing its charter by providing services to entities that take in money for these businesses, says Beth Mills, a spokesman for the California Bankers Association. The drug is still illegal at the federal level, and working through a correspondent bank, were there to be one, would not change that fact. And as much as excited as I do sound and as big as I think this is progress, I don't necessarily think this is going to happen. I should have probably said that at the beginning of the story, that this is a very hopeful idea that is probably going to need approval from the feds to be put into place. We've tried to get some of the same things rolling here in Colorado, and hasn't got off the ground because the insurance that goes with some of these accounts and the federal bank account number that's needed for legitimate banking won't be granted. Like, the feds won't grant that bank account if this is the reason why they're trying to get the bank account. We've appealed to, I think it's the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals here in Colorado, which is in Oklahoma. Great place. The barren marijuana desert of the United States. Not so much Utah. There's still a lot of people that smoke weed in Utah, and it's a shitty place to get busted in Utah. But of any place you don't want to get busted at, it's fucking Oklahoma. So it figures that in Oklahoma, this court would be like, "Fark your couch, we're not giving you this bank account number." So they refuse to do that. So without that happening, some shiz like this is probably not going to go down. Until federal law changes, the only solution would be direct immunity to banks dealing with the pot industry. which would also have to come from the feds. Those who think the Brown administration's proposal has merit include Jim Brush, president and CEO of Summit State Bank in Santa Rosa. I know for a fact that and it makes perfect sense, that if the danger of being prosecuted by the feds were to go away, the amount of money that these banks are going to be dealing with is astronomical. Of course they want to work with the money. Of course they want to have this as part of their bank. Have this money go on to file, then be able to work with this amount of cash. Oh, you kidding me? Those who think Brown administration, but this guy says it will probably not work. Brush said, noting banks already do business with the federal and state governments who accept taxes directly from the marijuana industry. The Brown administration has consulted with federal officials on its proposal. That's a good thing to point out with the previous paragraph that we said. This is already cannabis money being cycled through the tax system. This is a whole nother argument to get into, is the who's complicit in this whole situation with legal marijuana on the state level and the state government. It's one of those things that when we talk about it, we figure that the state government is just not going to be prosecuted at this point by the feds. That if the feds are going to come down on someone, they're going to try and bust it at the store level. But once again, man, the Sweet Leaf situation this week made us realize that a police agency can come into a situation and try and challenge the law and throw everything upside down. So there are things that we didn't think that could happen before that technically weren't policy to go after certain people or to go after a certain rule. That's not to say that tomorrow they're not going to go after that certain rule. Damn, it sucks. We get a little naive in this industry, I think, sometimes, in thinking that I shouldn't say naive. That's the wrong word. Maybe it is the right word in some situations, but maybe the better word is that we get a little bit more comfortable than maybe we should feel sometimes in this industry. I didn't mention it in the Sweet Leaf story, but it certainly freaked me out that this happened to these bud tenders, because there were certain things that I didn't think that I thought that certain employees and certain people would be shielded from being prosecuted because they would go after the company who set the rules, and talk about naive thinking. Anyway, let's finish out this story. State officials don't expect the federal government to formally approve any plans. They don't sign off on anything, Williams said. You will know that they don't like it because they will start shutting down banks that are doing it. So what's interesting here is that, like with that last quote, and what I was going to end this story with, is that there's a possible hope. And it's slightly happening here in Colorado, that some of these banks, local banks, become, I don't know, for lack of a better term, activist banks that say, what we're doing is legal. Like, I don't see why you would come after us. We're just going to keep doing it until you tell us not to do it. And in that case, I think that there would hope for the federal government to send out a letter saying, you have to stop banking with these people, period, end of story, or we're going to come after you. Once again, I remind you, that didn't happen in the Sweet Leaf situation as far as we know. So people got to watch their ass. It's not easy to be in this industry, I'll tell you that. So if you've been in this industry for a while, you've made it work, congratulations. Keep rolling. Don't let anything that's happened here recently scare you too much. All right, what you're doing, and I've said it before in the Sweet Leaf story, what you're doing are amazing things, amazing work, so that people in the future generations don't have to suffer the same way you're doing it. Even if you think you're not doing something for this industry, you are.
So high, it needed clearance from NASA. It's John Doe Radio.
We talked about Texas and medical marijuana that rolls out there soon. We didn't talk about the details very much and kind of how ridiculous some of the rules are there. When California rings in the new year with the sale of recreational pot for the first time, Texas will be tiptoeing into its own marijuana milestone, a medical cannabis program so restrictive that doubts swirl who will even use it. Texas is the last big state to allow some form of medical marijuana, albeit an oil extract so low in psychoactive component THC that it couldn't get a person high. Though it might seem that Texas policymakers have softened their attitude towards the drug, bringing them more in line with the U.S. population as a whole, they have not. A joint could still land you in jail in Texas, and the state's embrace of medical marijuana comes with a heavy dose of caution. Among the concerns are the license fees to grow marijuana in Texas, which are the highest in the U.S. at nearly $500,000, and that the program is rolling out with just 8 participating doctors in a state of 27 million people. And like other states, access is limited to a small pool of patients who have been diagnosed with intractable epilepsy and tried at least 2 other treatments first. We've talked about this a few times here on JDR, that if you set up a program to fail, that it will fail. There is absolutely red flags that go up when rules are made for a cannabis system in a state that say this is not going to work. Texas, even though this is a great gesture, this system's not going to work. Continuing on with this, among the concerns, this quote here from this person who lives near the border. It's heartbreaking being able to say, yes, you can get it, but reading over the whole law that there is still some things we have to jump over. He has a type of epilepsy called Lennox-Gastaut syndrome and is in a wheelchair. That's probably not how you say Lennox-Gastaut, but you get the idea. Her daughter isn't listed as having intractable epilepsy, but still has days when she gets several seizures. Seeing Texas put limitations, I do get that part, but I don't get that they did it without exact research. The frustration over access is similar in other states that have also passed restrictive medical marijuana laws. One Georgia legislator goes so far as to have low-dose cannabis oil shipped to his office from Colorado as a workaround to his own bill, which allows people to possess marijuana but doesn't give them a legal way to obtain it. And that's even super iffy if that's... I wonder how he gets that done legally. That's an interesting situation right there. Texas is another example of the ridiculousness of laws and how it just creates more hurdles and stupid problems to come up later down the road. Texas is similar to more than a dozen states that restrict access to low THC cannabis oil. However, Texas, which is 800 miles wide, licensed just 3 dispensaries, none of which are in the western half of the state or in fast-growing cities along the border with Mexico. And the Republican who won over skeptical conservatives to pass her law in 2015 is non-committal about expanding the program. That leaves Morris Denton, who runs the Compassionate Cultivation Dispensary near Austin, looking far down the road. If you're willing to take a long-term view and you're willing to suffer a few scars along the way, that success will come, he says. The lessons themselves represent a barrier to entry for others who may come in. I think it's hard to pinpoint how, when, and where to start a legal medical cannabis industry. Well, it's not really. I mean, we've proven it, and as I said before, the flags are raised. Red flags are raised when it's going to fail. Texas also has placed tighter control on marijuana growers. The licensing fee is 80 times more than originally recommended. The Texas Department of Public Safety once proposed a fee as high as $1.3 million to help offset the costs of state troopers patrolling the dispensaries, although that recommendation was later dropped. Growers are required to have surveillance video of every square foot of their facility and to preserve recordings for 2 years, which is longer than some police dash cam footage must be retained in Texas. They also aren't allowed to bring a third party in to test the quality of their product. The driver behind the Texas law is Republican Stephanie Click, a Christian conservative who strongly opposes recreational use of drugs and who didn't support expanding her law this spring. She said it took her 18 months to round up enough votes in the legislature and convince skeptics that patients weren't going to abuse cannabis oil. She said, there was one sheriff that thought these kids were going to be juvenile delinquents and end up in his jail. And these kids are really sick kids, she said, noting that lawmakers will consider expansion only after they've seen the results of current framework. I mean, how is it that we have to reinvent the wheel in every single state that's skeptical about cannabis laws being implemented? There are examples all over the place, across the nation and all over the world, of how this is not going to make the sky fall. I mean, here in Colorado, there's one argument that even Smart Colorado, they tried to spin this to say that, there are studies that say that cannabis use in teens is going down in Colorado. And then Smart Colorado's tried to spin it in some weird way, but even then they're not successful. It is the one positive thing that we're able to show anti-drug people that were on, and it's not the only one positive thing, but it is the huge shining beacon that the opposing side has complained about for years, that we were going to create more problems, more delinquents, more drug use with legalizing cannabis, and that has not happened, and studies are showing that it's not happened. So bringing that to the table is huge. But states like Texas, it's like the whole United States refusing to admit that there's studies about cannabis that have been done in places outside the U.S. Oh, but it's not the U.S. Oh, but it's not Texas. We can't allow that. It's just so frustrating. It's ridiculous. Where was I at? Sick kids, lawmakers consider expansion. Only 4 states, Kansas, South Dakota, Nebraska, and Idaho, have no form of medical marijuana on the books. 17 others, including Texas, allow only low THC medical cannabis. That's according to research from the National Conference of State Legislators. Kristen Hansen, a program director for the NCSL, said Texas is unusual for requiring that a doctor prescribe, quote-unquote, prescribe the cannabis oil instead of using the word referral like most states. The distinction is blamed for dissuading more Texas doctors from signing up. Because of federal law, marijuana is classified as a Schedule I drug with no use and therefore can't be prescribed. Dr. Van Ness, a neurologist at the Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, is one of the few doctors who have registered with the state to participate in the program. He said he supports the restrictive nature of the Texas program, though he concedes the downside is limited access. He said he already has patients smoking marijuana, some of whom have been arrested because of it. He said they don't belong in jail, but that's what happens in Texas, so if they can do it legally, that's a lot safer. What I hear in this article is a lot of frustration, number one, from the people who wrote this. This is from the Associated Press, Paul Weber and Claudia Lauer, who wrote this, printed in ABC News, on ABC News' website. So I think it's important to point out that regardless of whatever this story says, the tone of the story and the push of things is to make a functioning medical marijuana program work, and that is hugely concerning and becoming more and more concerning for states that don't have a working medical marijuana program, who are looking outside and seeing states that have it successful and they're seeing all the benefits of it. It's becoming more important for them to have a functioning system or put one into place. The fact Texas has even moved forward with anything, as I mentioned, took 18 months to even get any of the votes for this restrictive system together. To be able to pass it is awesome. But still, unfortunately, Texas not going to have much access.
Smile. It's a doobie.
No seeds.
That's going to do it for this week on JDR. Thank you very much for hanging out with us. I hope you have a very Merry Christmas. Next week probably will not be a JDR. I will try and fit something into the mix. And here's my plan. I'll fill you into my plan. I hate making excuse after excuse after excuse for why I don't get something done, because it just becomes lame after time. I do want to devote more time to the John Doe Radio Show, and with a full-time work schedule, it does become it's harder to do that than when I was doing JDR before, and it was pretty much one of the only things that I was doing. So just know, devoting to as much time as I possibly can to this show is my goal. So I have to get a little bit better at planning out the week and maybe recording things during this time and then not leaving it all to the last minute on Sunday to record the show. So I already put together stories during the week and researched that stuff, but I'm talking about like recording and the effort that you guys hear, the actual voice and stuff, and just not compacting that into this little can of a day and then trying to crunch that all out to you. So I love it. I love doing this John Doe Radio Show. I wouldn't be doing it again if I didn't have the passion. So thank you very much for being a part of it. As I said before, if you get a chance to catch up on John Doe Radio, you can go to iTunes or Google Play. Downloads instantly to iTunes or Google Play, or you can just push play from it there. That's what I do. Have a very Merry Christmas. Until we meet again, I'm John Doe. See ya.
John Doe Radio.